People judged Daniel the moment they saw him. His shoes were worn out, the soles slightly torn at the edges. His shirt had been washed so many times that the color had faded into something between gray and blue. His hair was always neatly combed, but no matter how clean he looked, there was something about his simple appearance that made people look past him, as if he were invisible, or worse, unimportant. And Daniel noticed every single glance. He noticed the way conversations stopped when he walked into a room, the way mothers subtly pulled their daughters closer, the way fathers looked him up and down, calculating his worth in seconds, then dismissing him with a tight smile. To them, he was just another poor man with no future. What they didn't know, what no one knew, was that this life was something Daniel had chosen. He sat alone on a wooden bench outside a small tea stall, holding a chipped cup of tea, watching the city move around him. Cars passed by, expensive ones too, their tinted windows hiding lives full of comfort. Daniel could have been inside one of them. He could have been wearing a tailored suit, a shining watch, shoes that cost more than most people's monthly income. But that wasn't why he was here. "I don't want someone who loves my money," he murmured to himself, staring into the steam rising from his tea. "I want someone who loves me." Years ago, Daniel had watched his own parents' marriage fall apart, not because of poverty, but because of wealth. His mother had loved his father when he was nothing. But once the money came, people came with it, relatives, friends, false admirers. And slowly, love turned into control, expectations, and constant suspicion. Daniel learned one lesson from that pain. Money attracts attention, but not always the right hearts. So when it came time for him to marry, he made a decision that shocked even his closest advisor. He would hide his wealth. He would live simply. He would present himself as a struggling man, earning just enough to survive. And he would let the world show him its true face. The first rejection came quickly. A family friend had arranged a meeting with a woman named Sarah. Daniel arrived at their house on foot, carrying a small folder with his basic documents. The living room was spacious, decorated with expensive furniture. Sarah's father looked at Daniel politely at first. "What do you do for a living?" the man asked. "I work at a small logistics office," Daniel replied honestly. "It's not much, but I work hard." "How much do you earn?" the father asked bluntly. Daniel gave a modest figure. The man leaned back in his chair, his expression changing instantly. "That won't be enough to support a family." Sarah didn't say much. She barely looked at Daniel, her eyes fixed on her phone. The meeting ended within 10 minutes. As Daniel walked away, he heard Sarah's mother whisper, not quietly enough, "He looks decent, but poverty ruins everything." Daniel smiled sadly. One rejection down. There were many more. Some families were polite about it. Others weren't. One man laughed openly. "You expect us to give our daughter to a man who doesn't even own a car?" Another woman shook her head and said, "Love doesn't pay bills." A few didn't even invite him inside, once they saw his clothes. Each rejection stung, but Daniel stayed patient. He reminded himself why he was doing this. He reminded himself that somewhere out there had to be someone who saw beyond appearances. Months passed. Then one evening, at the same tea stall where Daniel often sat, he noticed a woman struggling with a heavy grocery bag. It ripped, spilling vegetables onto the dusty ground. People walked past without stopping. Daniel stood up immediately. "Let me help," he said gently, kneeling to pick up the fallen items. The woman looked surprised. "Oh, thank you. I was being careless." She had tired eyes, but there was warmth in them. No arrogance. No judgment. Just gratitude. "I'm Daniel," he said. "I'm Aisha," she replied, smiling softly. They talked for a few minutes. Nothing dramatic. Just small things: work, the weather, the rising prices of groceries. Daniel learned she worked as a schoolteacher. She learned he worked in an office. When Daniel offered to carry her groceries home, she hesitated. "It's not far, but I don't want to trouble you." "It's no trouble," he said sincerely. Outside her modest apartment building, she thanked him again. Most people don't even stop anymore. Daniel shrugged. Kindness shouldn't be rare. As he walked away, he felt something unfamiliar, a quiet hope. Days later, they met again. Then again. Their conversations grew longer, deeper. Aisha never asked about his salary, never complained about his clothes. She listened when he spoke. She laughed at his dry jokes. She respected his silence. One evening, sitting on a park bench, she said, "You're different from most men I've met." Daniel looked at her carefully. "Is that a good thing?" She smiled. "Yes. You're patient, honest. You don't pretend to be something you're not." The irony almost made him laugh, but he held it in. When Daniel finally told her that he wanted to marry her, he made one thing clear. "I don't have much," he said. "Life with me will be simple." Aisha didn't answer immediately. She looked down at her hands, then back at him. "I don't need luxury," she said quietly. "I need peace." Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. For the first time since he started this journey, he thought, maybe I've found her. But the real test hadn't even begun yet. Their decision to move forward wasn't met with celebration. When Aisha told her family about Daniel, the room fell quiet in a way that made her uneasy. Her mother stopped folding clothes. Her younger brother looked up from his phone. Her father adjusted his glasses and asked the question Aisha had feared the most. "What does he own?" Aisha hesitated. "He owns honesty, a stable job, a good heart." Her father frowned. "That's not an answer." "He doesn't have much," she admitted calmly, "but he's respectful and kind." Her mother sighed deeply. "Aisha, kindness doesn't protect a woman from hardship." They asked to meet Daniel. When Daniel arrived at their house, he wore the same clean but simple clothes. He greeted them respectfully, his posture straight, his voice calm. He answered every question truthfully about his job, his income, his simple lifestyle. The more he spoke, the darker Aisha's father's expression became. "So you live in a rented place?" the man said flatly. "Yes," Daniel replied. "And you don't own land? A car? Savings?" Daniel paused for a second. "I have enough to live with dignity." Her brother scoffed. "That's not enough to marry my sister." Aisha's mother tried to soften the tone. "Daniel, we respect your honesty, but our daughter deserves security." Daniel nodded. "I understand." The meeting ended politely, but the decision was clear. After Daniel left, Aisha's father said firmly, "This marriage will bring struggle. I won't support it." That night, Aisha sat alone in her room, staring at the ceiling. She wasn't blind to reality. She knew life with Daniel wouldn't be easy. But something inside her refused to let go of him. The next time she met Daniel, she told him everything. "I don't want to fight my family," she said softly, "but I also don't want to lose myself." Daniel listened quietly. "I don't want to be the reason you're hurt." She looked at him. "You're not." They sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Daniel spoke. "If you decide to walk away, I'll understand." Aisha shook her head. "That's the problem. I don't want to." Her decision came with consequences. Her family reduced their support. Some relatives openly mocked her. She chose poverty with open eyes. One aunt whispered at a family gathering. "Love fades when bills arrive," another said. Daniel heard about these comments through Aisha, and each one weighed on him like a stone. More than once, he considered ending the act, revealing everything, stopping the pain. But then he would remember why he started this journey. He wanted to know, would she stay even when the world turned against them? They married quietly. No grand hall, no luxury cars, just a small ceremony, a few close friends, and sincere prayers. Daniel watched Aisha walk toward him in a simple dress, her eyes calm and confident, and felt something deeper than excitement: respect. Life after marriage was humble. They lived in a modest apartment. Aisha continued teaching. Daniel continued going to his office every morning, leaving early, returning tired. Sometimes money ran tight. There were days when they calculated expenses down to the last note. Days when they postponed buying things they wanted. Days when silence filled the room, not because of anger, but exhaustion. One evening, Aisha found Daniel sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at his hands. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I wish I could give you more," he said quietly. She sat beside him. "You already give me respect.
Time. Peace.
I've never had that before." Still, the pressure from the outside world never stopped. At weddings, people asked uncomfortable questions. "What does your husband do exactly? When will you upgrade your lifestyle?" Aisha smiled politely every time. But one comment cut deeper than the rest. At a family dinner, her cousin said loudly, "If you had waited, you could have married someone rich. Now look, counting coins." The table went silent. Daniel felt anger rise in his chest, but before he could speak, Aisha said calmly, "I married a man, not a bank account." That night, Daniel stood alone on the balcony, city lights glowing in the distance. His phone buzzed in his pocket, messages from his financial manager, updates about properties, investments, numbers that could change everything in a second. He clenched the phone and put it away. Not yet, he told himself. But fate had its own plans. One afternoon, Aisha came home early from school, her face pale. "What happened?" Daniel asked immediately. "The school's funding is being cut," she said. "Some teachers might lose their jobs. I'm not sure if I'll be safe." Fear crept into the small apartment. That night, Aisha cried quietly, not wanting Daniel to hear. But he did. He sat beside her, holding her hand. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." She nodded, wiping her tears. "I trust you." Those words struck him harder than any rejection he had ever faced. Trust. The very thing he had been searching for. Daniel realized then, this secret couldn't stay buried much longer. Because the longer he pretended, the more pain she might suffer. And the truth, when it came out, would change everything. The next few weeks tested Daniel in ways he hadn't expected. Aisha's job situation became uncertain. Every morning, she left for school with a forced smile, pretending everything was fine. Every evening, she returned quieter than before, her shoulders heavy with unspoken worry. Daniel watched her carefully, noticing the small changes. The way she stared at the wall while cooking, the way she counted her salary twice before putting it away. One night, while they were eating a simple dinner, Aisha broke the silence. "If I lose my job," she said softly, "we'll need to be very careful." Daniel nodded. "We'll manage." She looked at him. "You always say that. And somehow I believe you." Her faith both warmed and hurt him. That same night, Daniel received a call he had been avoiding for months. "Sir," his financial manager said respectfully, "the board is requesting your presence. The expansion deal can't move forward without your approval." Daniel stepped onto the balcony, lowering his voice. "I told you, I'm not ready." "With respect, sir," the man replied, "your absence is creating confusion. Investors are asking questions." Daniel closed his eyes. "Give me some time." He ended the call and stared at the sky. He had built an empire with discipline and intelligence. Yet here he was, struggling with the hardest decision of his life, not about money, but about timing. The following day, something happened that pushed everything closer to the edge. Daniel was returning home when he saw Aisha standing near the bus stop, arguing with a man. As he got closer, he realized it was her cousin, the same one who had mocked them at the family dinner. "I told you," the cousin said harshly. "This is what happens when you marry poor. Now your job is gone, your life is stuck, and you still defend him." Daniel stepped in immediately. "That's enough." The cousin laughed. "Oh look, the hero has arrived. Tell me, how much can you actually provide?" Aisha's voice trembled. "Please stop." But the cousin wasn't done. "If you had any self-respect, you'd let her go. She deserves better." Daniel felt something inside him snap, not anger, but clarity.
He looked straight at the man.
"You don't get to decide what she deserves." The cousin scoffed. Big words for a man who can't even protect his wife from hardship. Aisha grabbed Daniel's arm, pulling him away before things escalated. They walked home in silence. Inside the apartment, Aisha finally spoke. "I'm sorry you had to hear that." Daniel shook his head. "I'm sorry you have to live with it." She looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "Do you ever regret marrying me?" The question caught him off guard. "Never," he answered immediately. "Then promise me something," she said. "If life gets harder, don't shut me out." He took her hands. "I promise." A few days later, the news arrived. Aisha lost her job. She tried to stay strong, but the moment she closed the door behind her, her composure collapsed. Daniel held her as she cried, her tears soaking into his worn shirt. "I failed," she whispered. "No," he said firmly. "You didn't." But as he held her, Daniel made a decision. This test had gone far enough. The following week, he told Aisha he had an important meeting and would be late. He dressed the same as always, simple, unremarkable. But instead of going to his small office, he drove to the heart of the city. A black luxury car waited for him. The driver stepped out and opened the door respectfully. "Good evening, sir." Daniel paused for a second before stepping inside. The door closed, sealing away the life he had been pretending to live. Inside a high-rise building, executives stood the moment Daniel entered. The room fell silent. "It's been a long time," one of them said carefully. Daniel nodded. "I needed to see the truth." "And did you find it?" another asked. "Yes," Daniel replied. "And now I need to protect it." He spent hours reviewing reports, signing documents, giving instructions with calm authority. By the time he left, decisions had been made, decisions that would ripple outward. The next morning, Aisha received a call. A private school had reviewed her credentials and wanted to hire her immediately, with a salary twice her previous one. She stared at the phone in disbelief. "That's impossible," she said when she told Daniel. "Nothing is impossible," he replied gently. But questions had begun forming in her mind. That same day, Daniel paid off several outstanding expenses, quietly, anonymously. Repairs were suddenly completed. Bills disappeared. Doors that had once been closed began opening. Aisha noticed. "You didn't tell me about this opportunity," she said one evening. "About your connections." Daniel met her gaze. "Would it matter?" She hesitated. "I just feel like there's something I don't know." He took a deep breath. "There is." Before she could ask more, Daniel's phone rang. This time, he didn't step away. "Yes," he said calmly. "I'll be there." Aisha listened, confused by the confidence in his voice, the tone she had never heard before. "Who was that?" she asked. Daniel looked at her, his expression serious. "Tomorrow, I need you to come with me somewhere." "Where?" she asked. He paused. "Somewhere that will answer all your questions." That night, Aisha couldn't sleep. And Daniel knew, by tomorrow, the life they had known would be gone forever. The next morning, Daniel woke up before sunrise. He sat at the edge of the bed, watching Aisha sleep. In the soft light filtering through the curtains, her face looked peaceful, unaware that by the end of the day, everything she believed about her husband and their life would change forever. For the first time since he had met her, Daniel felt afraid. Not of losing money, not of judgment, but of losing her trust. When Aisha woke up, she noticed something different immediately. Daniel wasn't wearing his usual clothes. He still looked simple, but the fabric was cleaner, the fit sharper. There was a quiet confidence in the way he moved, a stillness she had never noticed before. "Where are we going?" she asked as they left the apartment. "You'll see," he replied gently. Instead of walking to the bus stop, Daniel led her to the main road. Aisha frowned slightly. "We're not taking the bus." Daniel shook his head. A sleek black car pulled up in front of them. The driver stepped out and opened the back door. Aisha froze. "Daniel, whose car is this?" He met her eyes. "Please trust me." She hesitated, then slowly got in. The interior was luxurious. Leather seats, soft lighting, quiet power. Aisha sat stiffly, her heart pounding. The drive took them into the city's financial district. Tall glass buildings rose around them like giants. When the car stopped in front of one of the tallest towers, Aisha's breath caught. People in suits hurried past. Security guards stood at the entrance. Daniel stepped out first and offered his hand. "This is where I work," he said. Aisha stared at him. "You said you worked in a small office." "I wasn't lying," he replied calmly. "I just didn't tell the whole truth." Inside, the atmosphere changed instantly. The security staff straightened when they saw Daniel. One of them nodded respectfully. "Good morning, sir." Aisha's heart skipped. They entered the elevator. As it rose, Aisha felt dizzy. "Daniel," she whispered, "what is happening?" He took her hand. "I never wanted to deceive you. I wanted to protect what we had." The elevator doors opened onto a private floor. A large conference room came into view, filled with men and women who stood the moment Daniel walked in. "Good morning, Mr. Rahman," they said in unison. Aisha turned to him slowly. "Mr. Rahman?" Daniel took a deep breath. "My full name is Daniel Rahman. I'm the founder and CEO of this company." The words hung in the air. Aisha felt her knees weaken. She looked around, at the glass walls, the city stretching beneath them, the people waiting silently. "You're wealthy?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Daniel nodded. "More than I ever wanted to be." Her mind raced. Every memory replayed itself, the small apartment, the counting of coins, the humiliation, the tears. "Was any of it real?" she asked, her voice shaking. "All of it," he said immediately. "Except the poverty." He turned to the executives. "Please give us a moment." They left without question. Aisha pulled her hand away. "You watched me struggle. You watched me lose my job. Why?" Daniel's voice broke. "Because I needed to know if you loved me or the life I could give you." Tears filled her eyes. "And what if I hadn't?" "Then I would have let you go," he said quietly, "and lived with that pain." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Aisha spoke. "You should have trusted me." "You're right," Daniel said. "And I'm sorry." She turned away, walking to the window, staring down at the city. "I defended you," she said softly. "I chose you when everyone mocked us." "I know," Daniel said. "That's why you're standing here now." She turned back to him, anger mixing with confusion. "So, what happens now? Do we move into a mansion and forget everything?" "No," he replied. "We move forward honestly." He told her everything about his past, his parents, his decision to pretend, every rejection he had faced before her. He spoke without excuses, without pride. When he finished, Aisha sat down slowly. You tested me, she said. And I passed. Yes, Daniel admitted. But love isn't an exam, she said firmly. Daniel nodded. I know. That's my mistake. Her phone buzzed. It was her father. She hesitated before answering. Aisha, he said, his tone unusually polite. I heard something. Is your husband? Yes, she replied calmly. He's wealthy. There was a long pause. Why didn't you tell us? Her father asked. Aisha looked at Daniel. Because you wouldn't have seen him. Only his money. The line went silent. Later that day, news spread quickly. Relatives who once avoided them suddenly called. Invitations appeared. Apologies followed. Daniel watched it all quietly. That evening, back in their small apartment, Aisha stood in the doorway, looking around. So, she said, was all this fake too? Daniel smiled sadly.
No.
This is where I learned what love really means. She looked at him for a long time, then finally said, We're not leaving yet. Relief washed over him. But, she added, no more secrets. Never again, he promised. Outside, the city lights glowed brighter than ever. And somewhere among them, judgment was turning into regret. The days that followed felt unreal, as if life had quietly shifted into a different rhythm. Daniel didn't move them out of the apartment right away. In fact, he insisted they stay for a while, letting the truth settle slowly instead of overwhelming everything they had built. But the world outside their door had already changed. Calls came nonstop. Relatives who had once ignored Daniel now spoke with forced warmth. People who had laughed at his worn shoes suddenly remembered his good manners. Families who had rejected him before marriage now asked awkward questions, trying to hide their regret behind curiosity. One evening, Aisha's cousin, the same one who had humiliated them at the bus stop, called. I didn't know, he said, his voice careful. If I had known who he really was. Aisha interrupted calmly. You knew exactly who he was. You just didn't know his bank balance. She ended the call without waiting for a reply. Daniel watched her from across the room. Do you ever wish I had told everyone earlier? He asked. She shook her head.
No.
This way I know who is real. The biggest test came when Aisha's parents asked to visit. They arrived dressed formally, sitting stiffly on the old sofa that once symbolized everything they feared for their daughter. Aisha's father avoided Daniel's eyes at first. I owe you an apology, he finally said. I judged you. Daniel responded respectfully. I allowed you to. The honesty in that answer stunned the room. Aisha's mother wiped her eyes. We thought we were protecting our daughter. I know, Daniel said gently. But she protected herself by choosing what mattered. Silence followed, heavy, humbling. Then Aisha spoke. I didn't marry him because he was poor. I married him because he was kind when no one was watching. Her father nodded slowly, the weight of his mistake settling in. As weeks passed, Daniel began stepping back into his real responsibilities, but on his own terms. He refused flashy announcements or public displays. He continued dressing simply, continued speaking quietly. But people noticed. Employees spoke of the CEO, who listened more than he spoke. Of the man who understood struggle not from reports, but from living it. Quiet initiatives began, anonymous scholarships, school funding, housing support. Aisha watched all of it with a new understanding. One evening, she asked, Would you have revealed the truth if I had left you? Daniel thought for a long moment.
Yes.
But I would have remained alone. She reached for his hand. Then I'm glad I stayed. Their move to a new home came later. Not a mansion, but a warm, light-filled house near a park. Aisha insisted on choosing it herself. I don't need gold walls, she said. I need peace. Life settled into something deeper than comfort, meaning. But the final moment of reckoning came unexpectedly. Daniel was invited to speak at a community event about success. The hall was full. Among the audience were people who had once rejected him, mocked him, dismissed him. Daniel stood at the podium, dressed simply, his voice calm. "People often ask me how I became successful," he said. "They expect a story about money. But my real success came when I had nothing to prove." He paused, scanning the room. "I pretended to be poor not to deceive, but to discover. And what I discovered was painful, but honest." The room was silent. I learned that many people don't see a man. They see his worth written on his clothes, his car, his address. His eyes softened. But one woman saw my patience, my effort, my heart. And because of her, I learned what wealth actually is. Aisha sat in the audience, tears streaming down her face. After the event, people approached Daniel, some apologetic, some embarrassed, some speechless. But none of it mattered anymore. That night, Daniel and Aisha walked hand in hand through the quiet park near their home. "Do you ever regret pretending?" Aisha asked. Daniel smiled gently.
No.
"Because it led me to you." She stopped walking and looked at him. "Promise me something. Anything. Never let money speak louder than your character." He nodded. "That's a promise I made long before you." They stood there for a moment, surrounded by silence, by truth, by a love tested and proven. The world had finally seen Daniel's wealth. But only Aisha had seen his heart first. And that made all the difference. If this story touched your heart, remember this. Real love doesn't ask about your bank balance, your car, or your status. It listens to your silence, stands beside you in struggle, and chooses you when the world turns away. Money can impress people, but only character can keep them. So before you judge someone by what they have, ask yourself, would you recognize a good heart if it stood right in front of you? If you believe true love still exists like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today. And subscribe to this channel, because more stories like this are coming, stories that remind us what really matters. Red Heart